Hello, everyone. Welcome to Joe's Hot Takes 25, Season 2, Episode 6. This is great. Here we are, well into 2026. I hope this new year is being good to everyone out there. Okay, so today let's talk about lawsuits. Who really wins? Um, you know, it's it's crazy what you see. You turn on the TV and you see some of these settlements and lawsuits, and they could be over car crashes or divorces or somebody said something slanderous. Uh, See people losing their jobs and filing these lawsuits and receiving huge settlements out of this. So I just thought this might be a good topic. So let's jump into it. So I'm your host. I'm Joe. Welcome back. And let's put on our invisible neckties, right? And let's step into the courtroom of public opinion. Let me ask you something, because that's what we do here. We ask questions. Why do lawsuit settlements seem so ridiculously high? That's a good question. And how about this? Who actually gets paid? I saw a commercial the other day where the lawyer and the client are sitting across the table, and there's a big stack of money, and the lawyer grabs two or three little stacks of the money and hands it to the client. And here's yours. Here's your portion of the settlement, and the attorney took the big clump of money, and that was their portion of the settlement. And that doesn't seem very fair now, does it? But I guess that's why some people went to law school and some of us did not. I don't know. Why aren't there just some clean, simple caps? Why can't we put a cap on these lawsuits? Why do they have to be so outrageously high and so damaging? These lawsuits can be very damaging to people. So, we all think back and laugh about the McDonald's situation. Oh gosh, now 25 years ago, where a woman spills hot coffee on her lap from McDonald's and sues because the coffee was so hot, and gets this ridiculous settlement, and she may actually own a small island now. So, you know. Wow, come on. Yeah, we're talking about these lawsuits, and so I did some research, and let's provoke some thoughts, because here we go. Lots to talk about on this. And so let's start with, are the settlements getting out of control? Maybe. Are the damages and settlements, are they going too far? Are we just going too far out there with this? Millions of dollars. Unbelievable. There's a real term for this, for what's happening, and it's called social inflation. And we're not talking about economic inflation. We're not talking about gas prices. This is the emotional kind. So juries today are much more likely to distrust large corporations. So they see that a corporation has $1 billion profit, and a lot of people think, oh, well, let's redistribute some of that attitude. These big corporations have all this big money. Let's get some of it and give it to the little guys. And that's where you see what we call nuclear verdicts. And that's not a Marvel. Nuclear verdict is not a Marvel superhero or villain. Maybe a villain. But these are verdicts, you guys, are you ready for this, that are over $10 million. Nuclear verdicts, those are called verdicts over $10 million, and those are meant to punish, not to compensate. They're not for compensation. They're not for that little guy. They're to punish the big guy. So that's scary. So sometimes the harm is real, right? There are permanent injuries. I understand that. There are lifelong medical care. Losses of wages, emotional trauma. I understand that, and I do. I myself have dealt with emotional trauma, just in things that happen in your life, and it's real, and it wears on you. And there's nights where you don't sleep, and you're sick to your stomach, and it takes a while to overcome feelings. So I get that. That part makes sense, right? People deserve to be compensated for those type of losses. Understood. No argument here. But when we add in what's called punitive damages, and that's just what it means. It's just punitive. It's just punishment. So when we add in punitive damages, and again, those aren't about helping you. Those aren't about, the punitives aren't about helping the little guy or making a right wrong. They're about damaging someone, hurting someone, or something, maybe a corporation. It's about sending a message. And then you mix in all these other things like third-party litigation funding, aggressive attorney advertising, which we'll talk about really quick, investor-backed lawsuits. Did I say that right? Investor-backed lawsuits. Imagine that. There are investors out there that back these lawsuits. And why is that? Because they're going to get paid out. And that's how the investors are going to make their money. So they are investor-backed lawsuits. It's ridiculous. And, just the insane cost of going to trial. It's like going to the hospital, but in a courtroom. You're dealing with all the legal fees and all the legal people and procedures and documents and everything that goes into going into for a jury trial. So trial is expensive. And quite often, when it comes down to it, I've heard this called seeing the whites of their eyes, especially in a criminal case. The criminal's like, I'm not guilty, I'm going to fight it. Okay, we're going to jury trial, we're going to sit down, we're going to pick a jury, and we're going to play court, and they get the big eyes and go, oh, you mean a jury, they could put me away forever. I'll take the plea agreement. And so, they try to settle it. The same thing happens with some of these companies, right? They try to just, let's settle this before it gets to the evening news. Whether we're right, whether we're wrong, it's going to cost us millions and millions of dollars, especially if we go into court. So a lot of these companies and a lot of these attorneys for the companies reach out and say, listen, I understand you have damages. Your damages are worth X number of dollars. We'll inflate that and provide you with a little extra cushion, and we'll settle this thing out of court, and we never talk about it again. That happens every day. A lot of companies, a lot of these cities that are involved in these legal situations, they have caps, and they try to stay within those caps. We can pay out X number of dollars and not go to court. It's worth it to us. Even if we're not wrong, it's worth it because we're going to save money in the long run. So that really has been a driving factor in the mentality of let's take them to court. Because let's just face it, none of us want to go to court. And if you've ever had to go to court or you've been involved in legal proceedings, let me tell you, you want to talk about sleepless nights? Miserable. It's miserable. It's terrible. There's just absolutely nothing good about it. So, all right. So there's this big settlement, right? We have this case, and whatever happens, there's this big settlement. Excuse me. Who's actually going to get the money? Well, let's talk about who really benefits from all of this. Let's talk about personal injury. Most personal injury lawyers work on contingency fees. Sounds nice, right? Oh, it's a contingency fee. That's cool. All right. So they get somewhere between 33 and 40% generally is what a lot of these attorneys go for. 33 to 40% of a settlement. Now, sometimes there's more. There's more money involved in that. So this is interesting. All right. Probably 40, 50 years ago, attorneys didn't advertise on television. They didn't advertise. If you needed an attorney, you looked in the phone book, you looked in the yellow pages, which I know doesn't exist anymore. But you looked for an attorney, or word of mouth got you an attorney. But there was none of this, the duck or the penguin, the wolf, the eagle, I don't know, all these animal attorneys out there. Really, I'd like to see one of them say, I'm the shark, because let's face it. So you have the wolf or the eagle or the duck or whatever the attorney is. They're all over television, right? They're on prime time. You're watching the 5 o'clock news, 6 o'clock news, and these attorneys are coming on. As a matter of fact, at the bottom of some of the newscasts, you'll see that this newscast or the portion of this newscast is sponsored by such and such law offices. So they're putting a lot of money into advertising, and in their advertising, it's funny. There's some groups out there that are like, oh, you got in a wreck, you need a check, give us a call, we'll get you money. There's no, it's just a blanket of you make the case, we'll figure out a way to get some money, and even if we don't get you money, we're going to get paid. It's terrible. It's almost really, folks, it's kind of almost criminal. What happens. So let's break it down. All right. Let's just take a gross settlement of $100,000. 100 grand. Okay. First of all, right off the top, your attorney's going to pick up 33%. So they're getting $33,000 right off the top. All right. Then there's case-related costs that have to be taken out, right? So they're going to hit you with office expenses, expert fees, filing fees, things like that. What's left? Well, you get the leftovers. You get the scraps. In a lot of cases, it's not what people think it is. You just sometimes don't walk away with as much as you think. And it's interesting how a $100,000 settlement that when somebody thinks they're going to get $50,000, $60,000 out of 100, they're happy. They're okay with that because they're like, oh, I wouldn't have got this money anyway, so I might as well float half of that to the attorneys. Wow. Anyway. It's terrible and costs everybody money, right? These personal injury lawyers are a big problem in our society. You have a little fender bender, right? A little fender bender, a couple cars bump into each other, minor damage, but now all of a sudden you've got, because I saw it on the news or I saw it on the TV, I saw the advertisement, if I get in a wreck, man, all I got to do is grab my neck and tell them how bad I hurt. Let the ambulance come. Let them take me to the hospital, the whole 9 yards, because nobody can prove whether or not I feel pain. They might be able to prove that I don't have any broken bones. They might be able to prove that there's no bleeding or surgeries that need to be done, but they can't prove that I don't feel pain. And because they can't prove that I can't feel pain, that means there's a settlement number in there. And those numbers get ridiculously large. And again, it's the attorneys that are gonna win. So when an insurance company pays out a whole bunch of money on one of these, I'm going to just say it, frivolous, ridiculous lawsuits because people are greedy, guess what happens to all of our auto insurance? It goes up. It goes up. And if you're not sure about this, I did podcasts on insurance, but look into it. Check with your insurance agent and say, why is our insurance so high? And they're going to tell you, well, it's because of the cost of collisions. How much does it cost to repair a vehicle now, right? Those prices are inflated as well. So, and then you throw in the legal fees. Oh my gosh. All right. So we talked a little bit about that because I don't want to drag on too much, but let's jump into this one. What about divorce? Oh my gosh, who wins in a divorce case? Nobody. Let me tell you, everything that you and your spouse have worked for, everything that you've planned for, all the things that you've done, remember the day, before you go through a divorce with a divorce attorney, if this is something you can handle on your own, I would say handle it on your own, but I don't like to put my opinions in. I just always think this. This couple sat across the table from one another, and they looked into each other's eyes, and they said, I love you. I love you too. We're going to be together forever. We're going to have the best life ever. Oh, you're just perfect for me, and I'm perfect for you, and blah, blah, blah. And then they end up in a divorce 5 years, 10 years, 25 years down the road, and they hate each other. Why do they hate each other? Because the divorce attorneys insist upon you hating one another. Don't talk to them. Don't do this. Don't do that. We're not giving any concessions. This is what you're entitled to. When an attorney can sit at their desk and go to tell someone you're entitled to something that someone else has earned, they can stick it. I'm not okay with that. All right. So, here we go. Divorce attorneys. What are they making? Well, I did some research. I'm finding that the average is somewhere between 150 and 700 plus dollars per hour, right? You get those big high dollar lawyers. You're talking big money. I can tell you this, in Phoenix right now, it looks like the average cost of an attorney is about $400 an hour. I said that, $400 per hour. Wow. Okay. Now, you got retainers, right? So you're going to spend anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 day one. Before you even get to sit down and talk to your lawyer, you're going to give them somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 just for them to consult this case and get started. Now, if it's a complex case, like, I don't know, some of these major divorce cases that you see, or cases where, you know, there's a big businesses involved in settlements, you're talking over $100,000 in legal fees on some of these things, right? So a lawyer can quite honestly, one good case can float them for a whole year. That's all they need, one good case. I should have been a lawyer. All right, so you know what that means. So two people spent 20 years building a life, right? And then everything that they have is going to get divided between them. But that's not really what happens, because you got to remember, this lawyer, they've got their fingers in this pot, and the more they can make you fight, the more that they can make you hate each other, the more that they can get, the more that they can take, and they will take. Trust me, the lawyers win. That's who wins. In a divorce settlement, the lawyers are going to win. So, I mean, I'm not going to give you legal advice here. If you think you need a lawyer, by all means, get a lawyer. If you think you can handle it without a lawyer and you can be amicable with one another, then do that. Because I'll tell you what, I know what I went through in my life. I've worked hard. I've taken a lot of risks. I've been involved in things that, you know, that kind of shake you to the core. And honestly, I'm not willing to split that with somebody. Right? That was a lot of there was a lot of things that I dealt with in my life that I don't feel like splitting with somebody. Anyway, I know there's a lot of different thoughts on that, so I'm just going to give you some facts. So you hear about these things that are called frivolous lawsuits, right? All right. So there's the thing. There's no really reliable data that tracks these frivolous lawsuits, these ridiculous lawsuits that you hear, because legally, in order for someone to call a lawsuit frivolous, there's a very high bar that they must cross over first. So we might hear something, what looks ridiculous to the public, right, might actually have a legitimate merit. But we see this on the news. We'll hear about a divorce. We'll hear about it, not a divorce, I'm sorry, we're done with that. We'll hear about the lady at McDonald's that spilled the hot coffee on their lap and got, you know, $1 million settlement. And you think, how could that possibly happen? There's probably no permanent damage. I don't know anything about the case, so this is going to be a makeup case, right? But if there's no permanent damage, there's really little to no probably emotional damage. There's no physical damage. So where do we get that? Well, that goes back up to that punishment. McDonald's is a big corporation, or whoever. It doesn't have to be McDonald's. It could be any corporation. So people feel like, let's punish them. And then we go and we get a cup of coffee, and it has written all over the cup, caution, hot, very hot, caution, you could be burned, caution, you know, because some lady spilled her coffee thinking that for some reason it wasn't going to be hot or as hot as it was. Unbelievable. So, but again, it may look frivolous, it may look ridiculous to us, but maybe there's some legitimate merit to it. But civil lawsuit rates actually have declined. So that's kind of cool. So tort lawsuits dropped from 10 per 1,000 people. So that means out of 1,000 people, 10 people were filing these lawsuits. Back in 1993, so let's move forward, we were less than 2 people per 1,000 in 2015. So I think there's been some work done on really taking these cases and the courts looking at them and going, no, we're not doing this. This is ridiculous and we're not doing it. So we've been able to bring that number down pretty significantly from 10 per thousand to 2 per thousand by 2015. So, but cases get settled sometimes just because it's cheaper to pay someone to go away than to fight them in court. That's what I was talking about. So that 2 in 15 or 2 in the 1,000 in 2015 might actually be there were still 10 or 15 people trying to do a lawsuit. But like I had said, sometimes it's easier for these corporations and companies and cities and whoever else to just go, look, I'll just pay you. I'll give you $10,000, just go away. So anyway, that's called the nuisance value, by the way. That's what they call that, the nuisance value, which sounds like, your neighbor with a leaf blower at 6 a.m. is a nuisance. And so if you do have a leaf blower, please don't go out there and start leaf blowing at 6 a.m., right? It's just not cool. Anyway, all right. So, anyway, I don't know if here's a plug for Hulu, I guess. There's a show on Hulu, right? And it's called All's Fair, and it's about this group of female attorneys. And okay, it's a TV show, right? It's highly dramatized. Absolutely, I get that. Totally unrealistic, though. Not so much. What you see in here, it's really interesting, is you see these attorneys, especially in the divorce cases on this show, because they're talking, we're high value, high dollar attorneys. They're asking for more. They're asking for more. And they're telling their client, no, go for everything. This is what we're going to do. We're going to ruin you and take everything that you've ever worked for. And they'll use every loophole known to the court systems or to the legal system. They will find these little loopholes. And it's scary. And then you take people that are emotionally charged, and it's easy to steer them, right? If you have a divorce case, for instance, where you have someone that's really upset with the other person, right? Maybe it's maybe they were cheating or something, which in the state of Arizona and in a lot of states, these are no-fault divorce states. So there's no fault. It's just basically irreconcilable differences. We just don't get along. We don't want to be married anymore, so we're separating and divorcing. Okay, so but then they feel one or the other party feels really slighted by the other, and so now they're emotionally charged, and it's really easy to just give that person a little bit of a push, and then they say, yes, I want everything. I'm going for the whole enchilada. We're gonna wipe this person out. So be careful. Be careful. Try to always sit back and look at the big picture, and just, you always say this in the podcast, is be kind to one another. Be kind. Think it through. Is this going to be greed? Is it going to be revenge? Is this retaliation? Is it the best move? I don't know. But if you can keep the lawyers out of the emotional phase and stick them only on what they're doing, their legal expertise, and keep them out of the nuclear stuff, you might come out better, right? Try to settle things before they go nuclear, and we talked about nuclear. So your bank account, your sanity, they will all thank you for keeping a level head, being kind, being understanding, and remembering that you both loved each other one day. Now you might be fighting, but it's not worth losing everything. Okay, now I want to segue into this. So we talked a little bit about, the car crashes and the hot coffee spills, and we talked a little bit about the divorce, where does that going to go? But let's jump into this. This is interesting. This is estates, and I've seen this. I'll tell you, I'm not going to give you legal advice because I can't. I'm not an attorney. I am going to give you this advice. Go see an attorney. If you don't have an attorney, find one. And the best way to find one, I think, is word of mouth. But find an attorney and do a will or set up a family trust. Whichever direction that they guide you in is what you should do. And make it sure everything is always held above board so that there's nothing hidden. All right, so when we get into estates, we get into something that's really interesting. We see this all the time. We see this all the time where you have an estate that has a substantial amount of value, could be cash or it could be asset value, but you see an estate with value, and then you have family members, and that could be brothers and sisters, it could be aunts and uncles, cousins, whoever's involved in any way in this estate. What you find is that people are unpredictable. That's a good word, unpredictable. You think you know your family, you think you know your friends, you think that people will work together, always try to find the path of least resistance and for the greater good of the family, for the greater good of the estate. That doesn't always happen. So here's the thing. If you take on a position as an executor or as their fiduciary in an estate, that means that you don't just like help handle stuff. Like, you're the person in charge and you are personally liable. So if you mess up, you can be sued. Pay someone too early, you might have to pay the creditors from your own pocket. You skip a tax filing, yeah, that's on you too. Sell the property for under a market price, that can really be a problem, and that can come back on you. So again, if you're involved in any way in an estate or a family trust or anything like this, use your attorney. And you know what? It's going to cost you money, but let the estate pay the money and not let it come right out of your own pocket. Okay? All right. So here's the thing. In criminal cases, you've all seen the scale of justice, right? The scales of justice, and they're like this. Now, in a criminal case, there's a thing called preponderance of evidence. So you have to really tilt that scale. There has to be a preponderance of evidence. It is, belief beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a burden of proof. It's huge, right? In a criminal case, you have to prove that criminal committed this crime. You have to prove their intent sometimes, all the things that go with a criminal case. But in a civil case, when you're talking about stuff like this, estate sales and stuff, or estates, all it takes is a preponderance of evidence or just a slight tilt of the scale. If you can tilt the scale ever so slightly in your favor in a civil case, you're going to win. So it doesn't take a whole lot. It doesn't take the burden of proof of a criminal case. So keep that in mind, and this is why you need lawyers, because there's tons of loopholes. The legal system is very, very complex. So if you don't know what you're doing, you can get in a lot of trouble. So the scary part is, in a civil court, the burden of proof is low. It's very, very low. You just got to tilt the scale, right? Someone can allege mismanagement, they can allege delays or biasness, or hey, I think there's funds missing. All of these things, and suddenly you are exposed, right? Everything that you do now is going to be open book. So you better have all your receipts, you better have all your ducks in a row so that you can cover your own derriere. Moo. Trying to save money by avoiding an attorney? You guys, this is the time when you got to split the money out. You got to let the state pay for an attorney, let an attorney handle this, and you're going to be you'll be able to sleep at night, and you'll be able to keep your personal assets. And let me tell you, I did the research. I also have personal experience with years and years and years of being in law enforcement and being around, all the things that go with domestic issues, right? And here's what I've learned, and here's what I knew, and here's what I now have found on my research. That what fuels most of these lawsuits, Anybody want to guess? Anybody want to take a wild guess at what fuels these ridiculous lawsuits against family and friends? Number one, greed. Straight up, it's greed. And then jealousy. And then sometimes it's just old family wounds, right? It's just families don't get along sometimes. And so then there's people laying there like rattlesnakes, man, waiting. They're just waiting. And it's like, oh, here's my opportunity to strike. I'm going to take it. But people fight over money. It's terrible. People fight over money. They fight over houses. Sometimes they'll fight over something stupid like a lamp, and then this lamp was my great-grandmother's, and it's so important to me, and it has this emotional value. And so all these things you think you can handle, you can't. Just let an attorney handle that stuff. Okay, so how does America feel about attorneys? We talked about your personal injury lawyers. We talked about your lawyers that do divorces, and now we talked a little bit about getting into estates and things where we need lawyers. But how do we feel as Americans about lawyers? Well, I'll tell you, it's not great, right? It's not great. You can ask yourself, how do you personally feel about lawyers? And here's the thing. Gallup polls reports only 19% of people rate lawyers as highly honest. Only 19%. These are officers of the court. They are lawyers. And they are just less than 20%, 19% of the population feels like lawyers are highly honest. Now, IPSOS also says only 22% of the population actually trust a lawyer. So 19%, less than 20% think that they're honest, and then only 22% actually trust them. Now, that's there's a 34% in here, and this is, I know we're not hitting 100, but 34% that straight up don't trust lawyers. 34% of our population do not, I mean with talking zero, do not trust lawyers, while 22% trust them. And then that leaves a big gap in there. And how much do you trust them? Okay, why? Well, I can tell you, I've spent a lot of years in and out of courtrooms as a police officer, and I've been through divorce. Thankfully, they were not ugly. It was very amicable. But the system in and of itself is an adversarial system. And that creates problems because there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. And nobody is ever going to walk away truly happy, right? Maybe somebody that spilled coffee on their lap and got $1 million, they might walk away happy. But the only people that are really going to walk away happy and have drinks that night are the lawyers. It's not like a football game, right? Where you go say, hey, good game, move on. No. These legal cases, you guys, they change lives. And if you've been involved in any of this, you know what I'm talking about. It makes people skeptical, angry, distrustful. It can ruin your life. It can ruin your legacy. It's just before you get yourself involved in these things, think it through and make sure that this is what you want to do. Before you want to go file a lawsuit against somebody just because you're mad or you're feel slighted or you feel greedy or you feel like you're owed, think it through, and sit down and get a consultation with a lawyer. Ask for a free consultation. Okay, so how about a law enforcement reality check? Let me just throw this out there really, really quick. Now, this is where I kind of pull back the curtain, right? Over 30 years of law enforcement and court service I've done. So I do have a lot of knowledge about this stuff. And I've worked with countless lawyers and judges over the years. So I'm going to give you all a little spoiler alert. A little spoiler alert is this. They all know each other. They're friends. Sometimes they're good enough friends that they have lunch together or actually go have a drink later. And I'm talking defense attorneys, prosecuting attorneys. I'm talking about divorce attorneys from opposing sides. I'm even talking about the judges that hear these cases. Everybody knows everybody. And yes, just like the cartoon with the sheepdog and the wolf, right? Or the coyote. They battle in court, right? At work, they battle in court. And then afterwards, they go have coffee. It's real. It's not a conspiracy. It's just nature of the system. I can tell you, I remember very clearly. It was a trespass case. I was a police officer on the case. It went to hearing. I'm in court. The defense attorney is just drilling me up there on the witness stand, really trying to trip me up. Kind of in some ways trying to provoke me to see if I'll lose my cool on the stand. Just really pushing it, and we're kind of going back and forth a little bit. And it's time for a break. The judge calls for a break, and we all take a break, and we all go in the back. And the defense attorney that was grilling me like 5 minutes ago, he and I now are sitting at a table in the back, and we're talking about riding motorcycles because both of us ride bikes. And so we're just sitting there having this whole conversation about riding bikes, and hey, maybe next weekend, maybe I'll meet you up here and we'll go do a little ride or whatever, blah blah blah, right? And then it's kind of like, okay, we're going back to the court. And the judge, I remember the judge coming in and go, man, if I didn't know you two, I thought you hated each other the way you are on the stand. But that's just it. It's just what it is. It's not emotional. It's not personal at this point. At that, it's just a job. You're doing your job. And now remember that these attorneys are doing their jobs. The judges are doing their jobs. But don't think for 1 second that all these attorneys hate each other because they're on different sides, because they don't. Okay, they all know each other, and the judges too, and the cops. I love it when they're like, I'm going to take you to court and I'm going to have your job. And they go tell the judge all kinds of things about the police officer, and the judge goes, yeah, I know that officer. Like, we had dinner over at their house last weekend, and yeah, that didn't happen. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let me be very, 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 very clear about something. I am not saying that all attorneys are unethical or greedy. Okay, I'm not saying that. I have friends that are lawyers. I trust them, right? They're good people. But the system itself, it's complicated, you guys. It's expensive. And it can be very, very emotional if you let it. Don't let it take your emotions. Don't let legal situations eat you up. And they will. And trust me, I understand that. And we may not fully trust the system. But we have to figure out how to survive it. We have to understand it. And that's kind of the whole point today, is just, come on. If you have to deal with this stuff, take a deep breath, work your way through it. But like I say, be kind. Just always, my friends, always stay curious. Ask questions. Ask the hard questions, and do that with your lawyers. And fact check. You guys, please fact check. I've said it before. Fact check me. Fact check this podcast. Make sure what I'm telling you has accuracy in it. But fact check everything before you take a solid stance. And as always, and I'll say it again, I'll say it 100 more times, is be kind to one another. This is all we got. Just take care of each other, okay? Be kind, be kind, be kind. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up. I think we went over our 30, that I try to stay at around 30, but I'm closer to 40. So I'll see you next time on Joe's Hot Takes 25. Y'all be well, be kind, be curious.